This video is brought to you by Magellan TV, a new documentary streaming service founded by filmmakers whose mission is to tell great stories that have defined the human experience. Sometimes, when a painting arrives at the studio, upon first glance, all of the problems are laid bare. It is patently obvious that they need attention, ASAP. And such is the case with this lovely portrait. Obscured with a heavy layer of surface grime and discolored old varnish, the true colors are not even evident. But upon closer examination, we can see holes and a wholesale flaking of the paint from the canvas. This piece is incredibly unstable. Merely handling it runs the risk of losing some of the paint. On top of all of this, there is evidence of old conservation, some visible and some hidden. And all of this will need to be reckoned with. In addition, the interventions of the past have begun to fail. The lining is separated from the stretcher, and the adhesive between the old and new canvases has given way, causing a separation. The stretcher isn't even correctly sized to the painting, and as a replacement, it has failed too, breaking in multiple places. And while those problems are patently obvious, the full picture has yet to reveal itself. For this painting, there are secrets and sins on the road to salvation. This painting is a portrait of Sir Edward Hyde, a politician and advisor to Charles I and II, kings of England. And he lived a full and, well, interesting life. But such is the case with the royals. Who doesn't love an intriguing story? And the settings for all of this drama and intrigue, this fascination with the English monarchy, well, the setting for it are the beautiful manors, estates, and castles of Royal Britain. Magellan TV's Royal Britain, An Aerial History of the Monarchy, tells the story of the monarchy through places that bore witness to murder, romance, politics, execution, and celebration. From the sweeping landscapes where battles were fought for the crown and dynasties changed, to the Tower of London, Canterbury Cathedral, and Windsor Castle, this is a unique aerial look at the history of the monarchy that will inform and entertain through visually stunning imagery and majestic grandeur across the British Isles. So head over to try.magellantv.com/Baumgartner Restoration for a free 1-month trial where you can watch Royal Britain, An Aerial History of the Monarchy, and more. Before salvation, before the sins are revealed, and before the secrets shown, well, the painting needs to be stabilized. And that begins with a washi kozo, a Japanese mulberry paper renowned for its strength. A layer of fish glue, derived from the collagen and proteins of fish, is laid on across the washi kozo. It penetrates through the paper and adheres this delicate but strong paper to the face of the painting. Because it's so flexible, it will contour to the various textural changes of the paint film wherever it's flaking. And once dry, it will hold all of that delicate paint in place. Without this step, without this technique, we run the risk of losing some of that paint which has already detached from the canvas during further interventions. This is an absolutely critical step, and without it, no work could take place. But for now, we say goodbye to Sir Edward Hyde. We'll see him again later, but, well, you'll find out. Once the fish gelatin is dry and the paint is stabilized, the canvas can be removed from the stretcher. And in the case of this stretcher, it's not that difficult because it has largely separated already. Many of the tacks have pulled through, and you can see that the stretcher is broken in multiple places. Apparently it was glued back down, the canvas to the wood, that is, and that needs to be removed. Certainly not an archival or conservation technique, but one that was probably implemented to, well, stave off disaster. With the stretcher removed from the canvas, we can begin exploring removing the lining. And it appears that it is, well, removing itself. Sometimes linings are very well bonded to the canvas, and sometimes, as in the case of this painting, they are only the suggestion of well bonded. Clearly, not enough adhesive, or poor technique, or, well, all of the above have contributed to this lining failing in spectacular fashion. But that's good for me, because it is easier, and removal yields less trauma, less stress, and less work on the canvas. Now, in some places, I do need to use a small palette knife to get underneath the canvas, between the glue layers, and separate it from the original. This canvas is so brittle that it is tearing into pieces as I peel it off, an indication of age and, well, poor keeping of this painting. But for my money, I would rather a painting where the old materials have failed, where the old techniques were not great, and where removal is rather easy. Certainly more so than the alternative. This canvas seems to be in pretty good condition. As I'm clearing off the excess dirt, I don't see any major holes or tears or even any weak spots that would warrant an intervention like a lining. But there still is a layer of old adhesive, and that needs to come off for me to do my next treatments. And so I will use a substance called lapinite, a synthetic clay that effectively gels water. Once allowed to sit, I can come back with a stiff nylon brush and break down the adhesive. Rabbit skin glue, the adhesive used here, is hygroscopic, meaning that it will absorb ambient moisture. It will swell and become soft or reactivate. Now, because there is just a very thin layer of rabbit skin glue here, clearly not enough to bond the canvas down well enough, I don't need to use a scalpel. I can use a stiff nylon brush and a palette knife to scrape off the excess. And then I can come back with a slightly damp cotton ball and lift off whatever residues are remaining. Passing over it with a shop towel, and we have beautiful canvas. This process will take place across the entirety of the canvas, meticulously working to remove any excess rabbit skin glue. Now, it is impossible to remove all of the rabbit skin glue, including that is embedded in the canvas as a sizing material before the canvas was primed or had a ground layer applied. We don't want to remove all of that because it does add some structural stability to the canvas, a little bit of rigidity, and it can help us bond some of that flaking paint back down. But a layer sitting atop the canvas is problematic. Not only can it absorb ambient moisture and cause the canvas to distort, expand, and contract, but it can attract pests, from rodents to insects, and that can spell certain doom for a painting. Once the facing has dried, the painting can be transferred to the hot table and laid down on a release layer. That's the greenish thing that's sitting on top of the blotter paper. The release layer allows moisture and heat to pass through while preventing the painting from sticking to the absorbent blotter paper. This is often the case if there is excess rabbit skin glue on the painting. The painting and table can be brought up to temperature, the air removed via vacuum pump, and then the paint layer gently forced down with a balsa wood brayer. Once the hot table treatment is complete, the painting is transferred over to another table, pressed under felt and new blotter paper, and waits for a few days while it acclimates and any residual moisture is absorbed by the blotter paper and drywall. The painting is then transferred over to a release film, face down, where an adhesive is applied to the back. Before the adhesive can be applied, though, any little bit of paper or fuzz or anything needs to be removed. The adhesive is heated up, and once brought up to temperature and thinned out to the appropriate consistency, it can be rolled on to the back of the painting. Certainly it could be brushed on or sprayed on, but rolling it on gives the most even distribution of adhesive and has the most control. Not to mention, this adhesive is pretty noxious stuff, so spraying it is something I'd like to avoid at all costs. Back and forth and evenly distributing this adhesive is the name of the game. I want to make sure that there are no puddles or pools. The whole point of applying the adhesive to the back of the canvas was to address the instability and flaking paint. Because that adhesive was thinned out, it can penetrate through the canvas and fill all of the voids between the canvas and the lifting paint. It will settle in all of those nooks and crannies. The adhesive then cools and dries, much of the solvent that carried the adhesive evaporates, and then the whole painting can be placed on the hot table in a new envelope with release film on the top and bottom. The envelope can be adhered to the table, the air can be sucked out, and the table brought up to temperature. When it reaches the set temperature, the adhesive will reactivate and become liquid again. The vacuum pump will force the adhesive into and through all of those nooks and crannies while pressing the paint layer down, and this, once cooled, bonds the paint back down to the canvas. The process of an adhesive impregnation takes several hours from start to finish, and once the table is cooled, the painting can be removed from the envelope. Because release layers were used, the painting did not get glued down to the table. This is a lesson that has no value in the second time around. At this stage, I am ready to remove the washi-kozo facing that we applied to protect and stabilize all of that loose paint. Because the adhesive impregnation has now been concluded, all of that paint is now bonded down to the canvas and not to the washi-kozo. So with a little warmed water and a little bit of effort, I can peel back all of this facing. And we can see that none of the unstable paint is coming with the facing, because the fish gelatin is a weaker bond than the adhesive impregnation, and it's designed to be removed. Here on the face, where the paint was particularly perilous, everything is, well, bonded back down. None of it is lost, none of it is coming off with the washi-kozo. I mentioned earlier that there were secrets and sins in this painting that were an impediment to its salvation. Well, here begins the discovery process. Cleaning often reveals things that were not visible with naked eye. In fact, cleaning can often reveal things that were not visible with advanced imaging, such as UV or infrared. Infrared is often used to reveal retouching and old varnishes, but if there is enough surface grime and old varnish, the UV and infrared can't penetrate to that layer of retouching, and we can't see it. This painting is profoundly dirty. Simply removing the surface grime, we can already start to see a change, and my cotton swabs are quite dirty. This is an accumulation of dust, dirt, cigarette smoke, soot, and ambient accumulated particulate from the past, 50 or 100 years. Using a neutral organic soap, I can remove this surface grime without attacking the varnish layer. If the client wanted the original varnish, which this is not, this is a varnish applied during the last conservation, but if they wanted this varnish or the original varnish on a previously unconserved painting intact, I could simply use this soap and remove the surface grime without attacking that layer of natural resin varnish. It is rare, but in some instances, that's what a client prefers. And this approach allows me to meet those expectations. Already, we can see that the painting is, well, more beautiful. There's a little bit more subtlety in what we're seeing. But what we're seeing may not be the whole truth. Because underneath this varnish, well, secrets and sins. I'm using a relatively mild gelled solvent here to break down and remove the natural resin varnish. I've chosen to use a gelled solvent because it will allow more time than if I'm simply using free solvents. The gel slows down the evaporation rate and prevents the solvent from spreading, so I can add it and leave it on the painting for a little bit longer. This is a relatively mild solvent, so I don't have to worry too much. Now, there are other solvents that I could use that are more polar or, for this painting, more aggressive, and those would require a free solvent approach because they are stronger and require less time. But by slowing down the time that is required for the removal of the varnish and using a gelled solvent, I have a little bit more control. One thing that I am noticing, however, is that atop a layer of old varnish, perhaps an isolation layer, perhaps an original layer, is retouching. This is not terribly unexpected. I knew this painting was worked on in the past. But it's always interesting to see what comes off and what is revealed. Those are some of the secrets concealed by old varnish, grime, and, of course, retouching. Taking a pass on the areas of white and feeling confident and comfortable with the formulation of my gel, I can move on to the face. I start in a corner of the face, mostly as a test to see what results. And instantly, I can see some of those secrets. There is retouching on this face, and quite a bit of it. In fact, as I pursue cleaning this painting and removing this retouching, which is sitting on top of a layer of varnish, it becomes clear to me that the painting as I saw it, as we saw it in the beginning, is not the painting as it exists. This is not the painting that the artist created. This is the painting that the conservator created. And this is one of the secrets that is revealed as we peel back the layers on top of this painting. Things that we couldn't know from the get-go. And while we hope that those secrets will reveal something wonderful, that the painting is in better condition than we thought, that the painting is more beautiful than we expected, the reality, having done this for many years, is that oftentimes those secrets reveal sins. Sins of the past. Sins of poor care, poor interventions, excessive conservation, or the secrets of radical damage. And this painting is no exception. As I removed the last bits of varnish, I took a look at this painting under blacklight and saw excessive retouching. And so I had to go back and remove all of it and reveal the sins of the past. With all of the surface grime, discolored varnish, and old retouching removed, we can see what's left of the painting, which is not much. At some point, this painting was damaged, and then it was severely over-cleaned, and much of the original paint removed. And then it was repainted to reintegrate it into a unified image. These are the secrets concealed, the sins revealed, and I will have to find a way to overcome these challenges and bring this painting to salvation. With all of the varnish and surface grime and retouching removed, I can now turn my attention to this paper tape that was wrapped around the edges of the painting. Because it was so saturated with varnish, I couldn't remove it using water, so I'm using a scalpel to simply scrape it off of the surface, and any paper residue that's left can be removed with water later on. It's at this point that I can now turn my attention to the structural issues that plague this painting. Of course, the tacking edge is missing, and that will get addressed later on, but before that, I need to address the tear that encroaches from the edge into the field of the painting. I'm using a technique called bridging, which is a very lightweight, minimally invasive way of supporting a tear or hole in a canvas without applying a patch or a lining, which in this case would be excessive and, well, totally unnecessary. I did just remove a lining after all. Small strands of Belgian linen are cut dipped into an adhesive, and then laid down perpendicularly across the tear. These little strands, once dry, will provide enough support that this tear won't open up or tent up, revealing itself after retouching and varnishing. Bridging is really effective, and it can span really big distances. But for really small distances, it's a perfect approach, particularly for one like this, where the strip lining is going to cover part of the bridging anyway. Once the bridging is complete, a release film, felt, and weight are placed atop it. Several hours later, once the adhesive has been allowed to dry, I can come back and see just how well it's been executed. And that looks great. Because the lining was removed, there's no way to adhere this painting to the stretcher. The tacking edges were unceremoniously removed at some point in the past, so I need to add new ones. And it all begins with more release film to prevent any adhesion to my table, and a thermoplastic adhesive film. This is the same film that I use for linings, and with a little bit of heat applied, I can bond it to the canvas. Because this canvas had an impregnation, it's already receptive to this adhesive, so this is going to be a very strong bond. The Belgian linen strip lining is frayed on one end, and that's for two reasons. One is to soften the edge so that it doesn't telegraph to the front of the painting, and two, to provide more surface area for the adhesive to bond to. With more surface area, we can ensure a stronger adhesion. Once it's ironed on, I will cover it with a weight with a little clapper on it, and that's a piece of oak that's going to absorb any excess moisture as it cools. I mentioned that the stretcher wasn't original to the painting, and I know this because it didn't fit the painting. It was too large by about an inch on either dimension, and so a new one was ordered, custom built to size, and it will provide better support. Not to mention, it's not broken, so I don't have to repair it. Once the stretcher is assembled and squared, I can lay the canvas down, size it up, see how it fits, and then begin the stretching process. Of course, I'm going to be using tacks because I find them to be a superior way of adhering canvas to a support. As opposed to staples, there's only one hole. There's no line in between those two holes that can crease the canvas, and tacking is a deliberately slower process. And slow sometimes is good. Fast yields results quickly, but it can also lead to making mistakes in the name of speed. But when things are slowed down, we tend to take more care in what we're doing. We're more focused on the individual task at hand as opposed to the large picture. And that's one reason why I prefer tacks. Once the painting is all tacked down, I can deal with cleaning up the tacking edge. I don't like to cut this or glue this or leave it like it is. I like to fold it under and then tack it with smaller tacks. This is just something that I enjoy doing. I think it looks good, and I suppose there is some structural benefit to having a little bit more tacking support, but fundamentally, I think it just sends a message about care and precision that I like to come out of my studio. After stretching, keying takes place, and this adds just a little bit of tension to the canvas to keep it taut. And you'll see that I'm just adding, what is that, a 64th of an inch? Not a lot, but just enough to make sure the canvas isn't loose. The keys are drilled with holes so that I can fish some fishing line through, and then secure these keys into place with another little tack. And this ensures that if they come loose, they won't get lost or fall in between the canvas and the stretcher and create a bulge. With all of the losses on this painting, it is inevitable that it will require fill-in. And the fill-in is necessary because these losses, these divots, will reveal themselves after varnish. Even if the color matching is spot on, the texture won't be, and so we'll be able to see all of the work from a raking light. Not to mention, the retouching medium, the paint needs something to stick to, and it doesn't stick well to raw canvas. I'll apply the fill-in medium and then use my hand to rub it off. Once I've removed a significant portion of it, relying on some old printmaking techniques, I can come back in with a damp cloth and remove some of the overfill. There are any number of ways to do this, and I'm just trying to choose the most efficient method. After that, yes, it's time for little swabs, because there are some areas that are just too fine to use my hand or the large towel. And once I've removed all of the fill-in and I'm happy with it, I can take the painting over to the back to apply an isolation layer. And here the isolation layer is going to be for two reasons. One, it's going to help me see these colors better. The isolation layer, as you can see, makes the painting look more vibrant, and this is what it will look like after the application of the final varnish. So I can retouch to these final colors as opposed to washed out colors. But also, this resin is a little bit thicker, and it will fill in some of the really tiny voids that I wasn't able to hit with the fill-in medium, just softening the edge so that we don't see those gaps. Now onto retouching. What do we do when there is so much loss? Well, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I know, bad dad joke, but it's true. Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't run a marathon, but 1 mile at a time. And you don't approach massive retouching projects like this wholesale. You break them into small little pieces. And so first, I lay down some basic color, just blocking, trying to get the form and shape of the face complete, just so that I can see this as a person and not all of the damage. And then I'll pick off some low-hanging fruit, finishing up the lips. I want something that's easy enough to achieve, that gives me a little bit of wind in my sails, makes me feel confident about my color matching, about my brushwork, about how this retouching project is going. I generally leave the eyes for last because they're the most difficult and also most exciting. But slowly, bit by bit, using the little clues that remain from the original paint, because there are little bits of color, little bits of paint that weren't removed, I can start to build back what I think this person looked like. And I mention what I think this person looked like because I have no photographic reference. I don't know what this person looked like. I can certainly look up other paintings of Sir Edward Hyde, and I did, but they're not all that helpful because they're by different artists. So I have to use the clues that I have here. The painting as I received it was not a good indication of what he truly looked like because that was somebody else's interpretation. Remember, they had to cover up all of the damage that was instilled, all of those sins. So little bit by bit, just working slowly, matching color to the color around it and trying to use my understanding of the physical form of the face to complete the areas that are missing, I can start building this person back up, giving him his face back. I'm not going to say that this is much like what a plastic surgeon does because the stakes are infinitely lower. This is a painting after all, and all of this paint is removable. It's reversible retouching paints, so nothing I do here is permanent, unlike a doctor. And certainly, even if I am wildly successful, it pales into comparison for what doctors do. But in some way, it is like that. I'm trying to take what's left of a face and turn it into a face. And it's hard work. But boy, when you get it, when things start to come together, well, it feels really, really good. But there is a pitfall with adding paint. It looks too new, and the rest of this face isn't new. It has wear to it. So I'm going to come back in and start to add little dirt specks, little canvas specks, so that my retouching blends in with the areas that weren't retouched. With all of the retouching complete, it is now time for varnish, and I've chosen to spray on a slightly glossier varnish with my HVLP system. Whenever I use an isolation layer, the final varnish is really just to control the sheen and add some UV protection, so I don't need a heavily built-up layer. And spraying it on ensures that it's a very thin, very light application. So just one pass is all it takes, and this painting is, well, all done. And there it is, the painting all conserved and restored to a better state. All of the surface grime was removed, all of that very heavy, discolored, yellowed varnish was removed. The paint layer that was flaking off and so unstable that handling the painting was a risk has all been, well, stabilized. All of those lifting pieces of paint have been flattened down and the surface is even and smooth, as it should be. The tacking edge that was missing has been replaced, and it is well secured to a new stretcher, which will provide very good support going forward. But more importantly, the image, the picture itself, is whole. All of those secrets that were revealed, the damage, the sins that came to fore, the excessive overpainting, and, well, the removal of much of the original paint, they've all been addressed. And now this painting is as close to original as it's ever been. Certainly, it was a difficult process, challenging at times, but ultimately very rewarding to see a painting transformed to a state of, well, disrepair to something beautiful. And if we'd forgotten what the painting looked like in the beginning, well, here it is. Really, merely a suggestion of what the painting would look like once all of that hard and meticulous work was complete. Some projects are simple, and others appear simple, but become more complicated as the process continues. Secrets, sins, all obstacles on the road to salvation.